Let's talk about these Idaho murders for just a brief second. I have recovered my true crime channel. I am tickled over that. Some of you may know, some of you may not. Those of you who don't know, when I posted my testimony of why I have PTSD, I posted my testimony, my story. As soon as I posted it, my true crime channel was hacked. But some of you know that I have been a target for sabotage for whatever reason for a long time now. I have 3 YouTube channels and multiple social media accounts. All of those, including my emails, at some point in time over the past year or 2 have been hacked. I've been locked out of. They've been controlled. I mean, it's just a thing that I deal with. So I was able to recover my true crime channel. So let's talk about these Idaho murders. This case is so well known because it has been covered by so many media outlets, news sites, TV networks, any and everywhere. Everybody is discussing the horrible, tragic murders of 4 University of Idaho students. Now, what they don't have is a suspect in custody. What they don't have is a motive. A lot of rumors are going around, a lot of speculations, a lot of assumptions, and I think that's normal. I think that's human nature. To have questions, to ask questions, to state your opinions. It's who we are. Now, I will say this. I have not been following each and every update on this particular case. But my thought process has not changed since I first heard about it, when it first happened last month. Whenever they said, what stuck out to me was when they said the 4 people were asleep and tragically murdered. 2 people were left unharmed in the home. There was also a dog that was there. Now, I want to say this. I've been listening to a few of the updates that's been coming out. I haven't heard anyone mention the dog. Now, why, at first, were we told by the police, by investigators, and by one of these girls' families, Kaylee, her family, we were told the dog was there, the dog didn't bark. Do y'all remember hearing that? You might have vaguely remembered it because you haven't heard it very, very much since then. Well, my first thing was when they said there was a dog there, I'm like, well, did the dog not bark? Other people were questioning that as well. They said, well, the dog belonged to Kaylee and Jack. Jack is allegedly Kaylee's ex. Now, there's also been a lot of things, a lot of thoughts and opinions going around saying that Jack and Kaylee were in fact boyfriend and girlfriend. Well, they weren't. Allegedly. They were not boyfriend and girlfriend, and that comes from locals. People that actually knew them. People that don't want to be identified or named on any videos. But they have been cooperative with the police. And I just want to remind everybody, everything I talk about in my videos are opinions and opinions only. We are all entitled to have our own opinions. Opinions are not facts and should never be taken as facts. But it's our human nature to question things. And I will say this, and more times than not, a lot of these cases have been solved by YouTubers or YouTube sleuths, if you will. So I think the dog, okay, that little key nugget, the first report that come out, the first thing that we read was there was a dog there, okay? Now, we haven't heard about the dog. The dog allegedly belonged to Kaylee and Jack. The dog didn't bark. The dog didn't alert anybody that anybody was in the home doing anything. Y'all know as well as I do. If a dog knows you, it ain't gonna bark at you. Is it? It ain't gonna think you're an intruder if the dog knows you. I mean, that might be far-fetched, but I mean, come on now. At some point in time, we got to go with our gut feelings, okay? And a lot of people have had this feeling since day one, despite the family claiming Jack is innocent. The ex-boyfriend, the boyfriend allegedly is what they're claiming. He's innocent. But you know what I find ironic is that Kaylee herself, her social media, she didn't post Jack lately at all. She hasn't posted with Jack in a while. A while. You can go look it up yourself. It's public. She has not posted not one picture with Jack recently. To me, that speaks volumes. Now, before I add some clips that do give more knowledge into the situation from people who have been following the case and interviewed the neighbor, okay? Now, I told y'all I thought from day one that it's been Jack the whole time that was behind this. Okay, well, now the neighbor has been interviewed, and the stuff that's come out about the neighbor, I'm like, what? I've not heard this, so I'm aware that some of you have not heard this as well. So I want to add the clips in, and I want you to form your own opinions and let me know in the comments below. Now, this is the latest update from Moscow, Idaho. Detectives are interested in speaking with the occupants of a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra with an unknown license plate. Tips and leads have led investigators to look for additional information about a vehicle being in the immediate area of King Street residence during the early morning hours of November 13th. Investigators believe the occupants of this vehicle may have critical information to share regarding this case. If you know of or own a vehicle matching this description, or know of anyone who may have been driving this vehicle on the days preceding or the day of the murders, please forward that information to the tip line. Tip line 208-883-7180. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add these clips, and like I said, I want y'all to comment your thoughts and opinions below. I will meet you down in the comment section. Let's get the discussion going.
I'm going to start with you because you did something really interesting. You sat down and had an interview on your YouTube channel and podcast with a neighbor of these students, someone who lived in that area. But I first want to start with why you approached him for the interview, because the way that I understand it, he had some activity online and he was making contradictions about maybe what he saw and heard. So can you summarize who exactly he is and what he saw and heard?
Absolutely. His name is Enon Harsh, a neighbor of the four victims, and he did make contradictions. You're absolutely right. So after the murder, the day after, he wrote, "Wow, my neighbors," and I'm paraphrasing here, but I learned that my neighbors have been murdered. I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear a scream. He later on went on to edit that post and took out that he hadn't heard a scream, and is recently saying, "You know what? I might have heard a scream." Move forward, he did a Reddit AMA. And in that Reddit AMA, he decides to mention that he had met the victims, or at least some of them. He mentioned Kaylee by name in that memory of bringing over wine and meeting them, saying they were beautiful and joyful. All of these things kept coming and coming, and I thought, I have got to talk to this guy. What else does he know?
And Phil, I'm going to get to you in a second about what your impression with what of your impression of him in a second. The reason I'm going to do that, Phil, is because Lauren, my understanding, I'm not even my understanding. I was watching your feed of this, and in the chat room, people were very skeptical of him. It seemed to me, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that people might think he is the actual killer.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of, it's almost hilarious to me that people think I did it, and they're like telling me like, "Yo, you did it," and it's like, I don't know. It's kind of like the equivalent to like flat Earth theory to me.
Did you think there was anything strange about his responses, and what were people thinking of him?
I do think there were things that were strange about his responses. I think that, I do want to know again more about him, and I think it's fair that people are questioning him in chat. And I want to say, I know that True crime sleuths in the true crime community get a lot of flack from speculating about certain people, but I want to say he is the one that has come forward. Let's lay that out here first before we continue. He came out and stated he might have heard a scream. He came out with the Reddit AMA. He has shared a lot. So what we're processing as a true crime community right now is things he's chosen to share with the public. I do want to lay that foundation here. I think it's fair that people are skeptical of him. First, contradictions, changing stories, going as far as editing his Facebook post to say he heard a scream or he did not hear a scream, excuse me, and now he has possibly maybe heard a scream. In addition to saying he had met the victims, that was what was most prominent to me in that Reddit AMA. Wait, you've met them? He's never said that before. And then I thought it was interesting that he then said he couldn't remember all of their names in this long Reddit thread, and then referred to Ethan as the boyfriend, her boyfriend. It was the way he said it in the Reddit AMA, referring to Xana. He mentioned Xana and Kaylee by name, said he couldn't remember Maddie, although he does follow Maddie on Instagram, and then said her boyfriend, Xana's boyfriend. He also said that in the interview with me. He called Ethan the boyfriend twice, and I finally said Ethan's name. This is strange to me for someone that lives next door to these victims. We all know their names, and you don't. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and he said on there that, some of the nicest neighbors, he loved his neighbors. They were really nice people. Phil, for people who don't know, you are not only a legendary homicide detective, but also a master interrogator. You've sat across from a lot of people trying to get information from them. What was your take on what you saw from this gentleman? And, again, Lauren's right. He came forward. So what's your take on this?
Well, my impression of him is that he has inserted himself into the investigation for his own purposes. Um, I told you before we get on the air here that I was most impressed with his profanities and use of the word like. So the as I look at his,
Yeah, I will tell you that as a broadcaster myself, I took a little issue with it. I think he said the word like maybe 23 million times, but other than that, I tried to get to the substance of it. So yeah.
well, it got to the point where I was going to start counting them just for the entertainment value. But he, I watch him. It's hard to get a real good reading because it's on a video. Of course, he's on a camera and so forth and so on. Because I'm not seeing the total picture here of him, but what I can see through his narrative there, he is using the word like because that's a filler word. He's trying to come up with a few seconds there to determine what he's going to say next. Body is he does a lot of looking around, and I'm not talking about eye stuff. I'm talking about just his mannerisms. He does a lot of this, and there are a lot of subtle shoulder shrugs. He'll be getting into a discussion, and you'll see that shoulder start to pump. Those things together would indicate to me, if I was sitting in the room with him and had a better view of him, that there is a possibility of some deception in what he is saying. Now, the description of this SUV now all of a sudden that has come to light. He talks about, oh yeah, it's this really hot looking SUV, this and that, and he's really drawn to those types of vehicles. That's why he noticed it. I think he said that Kaylee drove a Ford, which is not in his mind a really high end luxury vehicle. And then he talks about the license plate was either Arizona or Montana. And then later on, he adds in Colorado. So I guess we're going to cover, kind of the Midwest, the Southwest, up to the north part of the country of what this possible license plate was. So a lot of things there in the discussion that don't tell me that he's being authentic. And then what Lawrence talked about here, that the fact that he came out at the beginning of this and said, I know nothing. I didn't hear nothing. I wasn't, blah, 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 barely knew these people. And now all of a sudden in this interview with Lauren, all of a sudden he was going to go crash one of their parties, I think is what he said. So my impression of him, and I alluded this, talked about this with you, Jesse, in my mind, if I'm one of the detectives, he's a suspect. He's a possible suspect.
That's the interesting thing, right, Lauren? So my understanding is he spoke with the police. This is somebody who spent time in prison. Did you get any sense from him about what he told them or why they were interested in him?
I didn't. What we do know right now is that, according to him, police allegedly were knocking on many neighbors' doors the morning of the murders, asking if they had heard anything. And he admitted that they knocked on his door and he talked to him and he shared what he knew and he shared about that night. I did ask him specifically in the interview, have you talked to police since? Have you talked to law enforcement since that time? He said he had. It wasn't quite clear, but it sounded as if maybe he went to law enforcement, but that was not said. That was alluded to. So I'm not quite sure because I did say, did they come to you? Did you go to them? He said, oh, I talked to him. Yeah. Could you share more about that? No, he said no. It was off record, and we moved on because on my program, if someone doesn't want to ask or answer something, we won't force the issue. But he said that was off record. He didn't want to share what that other conversation, at least one conversation, was with police.
Hmm. Phil, real quick before, because there's other aspects of the case I want to talk about, not just focus on the neighbor, but what questions do you think were asked of him? And do you think he's been officially cleared as a suspect at this point? Because we know the police department has come forward and saying, we've gotten information, we're clearing suspects, we're following up on leads. Why do you think they met with him and what do you think they asked him?
Well, he's going to be talked to because he lives there. So that's going to be one of the first people as they do that canvas, I'm sure, of the neighborhood. They're going to talk to everybody that they can get in contact with. And I am sure that they may have seen the very same things that Lauren alluded to about these changes in what his, for lack of a better term, his testimony might be. So he make these statements at the beginning, and he's made those statements to law enforcement. And now they may have seen, I don't know, of course, but I'm speculating here that they may have seen the very same post that Lauren saw and other people saw and said, well, maybe we need to go back and revisit this. And there may have been some things that he talked about in the first interview that were unsettling to the detectives at the time. And it's not uncommon. I mean, I did it myself. And in fact, I can recall a time where I brought a witness in, and the longer that I spoke with them and taking their statement, all of a sudden I had an epiphany and I realized that I'm talking to the suspect. I'm not talking to the witness. So, and I'm not suggesting that he is the person, of course. He is a possible suspect, and whether or not the law enforcement, the detectives have cleared him, I don't know. Only they know that. But I think it's a very it's a very odd conversation between he and Lauren this morning.
Well, as we continue the discussion about the Idaho case and we talk about, what was found or who was around during that time, obviously him hearing something, this neighbor hearing something is going to be really pivotal. But moving beyond that, there's this new detail that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. And there is that the police collected 8 hours worth of surveillance footage from a gas station. It seems that there was an assistant general manager who looked back at this footage and had kind of a weird feeling, wanted to look back and saw this white car passing at 3:45 a.m. And remember, this is important because we know the police were asking the public's help in identifying a 2011, 2013 white Hyundai Elantra that they believe was near the crime scene around the time of the killings. We don't know if this car on the footage is that car in particular. Lauren, your review of this case, what are you thinking about this car? What are you thinking about what might be on this gas station footage? Because it is another piece of information that we've just learned.
Yeah, my first answer is I don't know. My second answer, which is where my brain goes, which is where my speculation leads, is uh, is this a suspect? And I'd love to ask Phil this because I've wondered, the way the law enforcement worded it, we think they might know something that can help the investigation. They might have seen something. That's fair, and maybe that's true. But I've also wondered if it's further than could this be a possible suspect? And I'd love to throw that question back because these are the things that go through my mind, and I wish I could understand the layout of the town a little bit more too to understand how close they were or where this gas station is. But those are the things that cross my mind.